So when Sita gets off the palki, she walks towards Ram and their eyes meet and their faces light up. But then, surprisingly, Ram tells her,
The Rakshasas and the Vanaras. Is there an occult element attached here according to you?
Rakshasas of Lanka, very good looking, they came in all shapes and sizes.
Which side was bigger?
The Rakshasas were better equipped.
How does the war pan out?
Ravan suffers one loss after another amongst his top generals. Kumbhakarna, his brother, Indrajit, his son, and in the end,
What fascinated you?
in Lanka, Hanuman heard people reciting the Vedas. He saw the swastik symbol. He saw an image of Lakshmi.
Damn. What do you make of the weaponry after your studies?
There are descriptions using mantras to fire up weapons. Two variants, the dry and the wet type.
Wow. So it's not just limited to the Vimanas.
There was not only one Viman in Ravan's Lanka. Actually, there were multiple Vimans parked like a parking lot outside his palace.
So this incident about fire, Sita Ma stepping in, is in the Uttar Kand?
So the Yuddha Kand is in Lanka, and there is the incident of the Agnipravesh.
Do you think people don't know these details simply because they've not studied Sanskrit yet?
Many of the popular productions are not based on the Valmiki Ramayana, so the Ramayana that they know does not answer these questions.
This story of Love and Kush, the sons of Ram,
Yes,
that's in the Uttar Kand.
that is in the Uttar Kand.
Could you briefly take us through the storyline in the Uttar Kand?
Yes.
I absolutely love episodes like this where we get to dive deeper into Indian itihasa or Indian history. There's a lot of different versions of the Ramayan, including all the versions that you know of, the ones you've seen on television, the ones you've read in comic books. All of those have added anecdotes and all of those are slightly different than the actual true Ramayan, which is the Valmiki Ramayana. That's the only one that's considered historically accurate. That's the only one that's considered an actual representation of the Indian subcontinent's history. We've had some very epic episodes where we've deep dived into both the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in the recent past. And this is another one from that same series. Yashodeep Deodhar sir is a seasoned entrepreneur. He's an IIM and IIT grad, but at this point in his life, he's dedicated his whole existence to studying the Valmiki Ramayana. This episode is fantastic for anyone who has some base level understanding of the Ramayana and for people who want a slightly deeper insight into what Valmiki wrote in his version of the Ramayana, which is supposed to be the biography of the Emperor Lord Sri Ram. Very interesting episode. If you've enjoyed any of our Itihasa episodes, you're going to enjoy this one as well. But let me tell you before I let you slip into this podcast that Yashodeep sir runs a fantastic, almost undiscovered YouTube channel called 21 Notes where he's retold the Valmiki Ramayana in detail for a 2024 audience. So this episode contains some of the nuggets from his research, but once you're done with the episode, definitely go and check out his channel as well. For now, enjoy this epic episode of The Ranveer Show. Yashodeep Deodhar sir, welcome to TRS. We're in a phase of the internet where people are rediscovering the Ramayan and the Mahabharata again, but from a 2024 lens. So we've done some absolutely epic episodes in recent times about the epics, and I'm glad to see lots of professionals like yourself who are doing a bit of a career switch and getting into further study of the epics. So welcome to TRS firstly.
Thank you very much. Yes, pleasure to be here.
No, pleasure to have you here, sir. What's the core message that the last 6 years have taught you about the Ramayana? Like, why even go into this journey in the first place?
The core message is this, that the Ramayana is not as we usually understand it. In fact, for me as well, I thought I knew the Ramayana till I started the study. And what I found was it's very different. And second, it has much more relevance in our day-to-day lives than I had thought.
Okay. How is it different?
Well, there are many versions of the Ramayana, of course. And many times the versions that we are most familiar with are not based on one particular text called the Valmiki Ramayana. Maharishi Valmiki wrote the Ramayana for the first time. He wrote it at the time that Sri Ram lived. So he was writing the life story of a real person. He was writing a biography. And that is also the itihas. Itiha asa means that is how it happened. So if we have a question about what exactly happened, then the reference text is the Valmiki Ramayana. We have a lot of questions about the Ramayana, a lot of confusion whether, starting from whether it is a true story or not, and so many questions about Vanaras being monkeys or apes or Neanderthals, etc. All the questions are answered by the Valmiki Ramayana. The answers are there in plain sight, but unfortunately, they are not accessible to the 2024 reader.
Yeah. Why?
Because most of the productions of the Ramayana are based on versions which are not the Valmiki Ramayana. In fact, that has been my entire effort. The 21 Notes Valmiki Ramayana video series is an attempt to connect today's people with the epic, with the Adi Kavya.
Okay. I think most people get the reference points either from the Japanese anime or the Indian TV show from the 80s, Ramanand Sagar's Ramayan, or they get it from Amarjata Katha comic books. It's one of these three.
Yes.
But you're saying that these three have aspects which are not a part of the original Valmiki Ramayana.
Yes, many aspects. And I'm not saying that they are incorrect or they are not good productions. They are excellent productions, actually. But if we understand what really happened, then we can also enjoy the other variants, which are meant for a different purpose. Some of these are devotional texts, some are literary texts.
Where would you like to begin this podcast? Like, what are you trying to tell our audience? Like, they're coming off of a series of trying to understand the Ramayana in more detail. We did a couple of episodes with Nilesh Oak, sir, where the date was said to be around 15,000 BC or so.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a part of your study? Like, do you go into the real life linkages of the story that many of us know?
So my study has been on the text itself, right? And you asked me where I would like to start. Many people have mixed thoughts about an incident that happens right at the end, actually, which is the Agnipariksha. So this is right at the end, the war is over. Ram cannot go into any city as per the rules of his exile, and so he cannot go to meet Sita, who is inside Lanka. He asks Vibhishan to go and get her. He tells Vibhishan, Upasthapaya machiram, go and get her quickly. But then, strangely, he also says, Shirasnatam, Divya Bharana Bhushitam, after she's had her bath and put on her jewelry. That's his ask of Sita. Sita is surprised. When Vibhishan tells her that, she says, Asnatva drashtum ichhami. The bath can wait. I want to see him. Vibhishan advises that they should follow what Ram has said. So Sita gets ready. She is brought to the battlefield in a palanquin. And Ram instructs them to stop the palki and that Sita should walk up to him. Again, a strange request. The Vanaras and Rakshasas are curiously looking what's happening, and the guards are pushing them back. And Ram tells the guards, no, let them wait, let them watch. So when Sita gets off the palki, with this crowd watching, she is embarrassed. I mean, she didn't want to be a part of this spectacle after, all that she has gone through. She walks towards Ram, and their eyes meet, and their faces light up. After months of longing, they have finally seen each other. But then, surprisingly, Ram tells her, "Oh lady, may you be well. You should know that I did not fight the war for you. Ravan had insulted me by abducting you, and I fought for the glory of my Ikshvaku dynasty. And now there is a doubt about your character. Prapta charitra sandeha." He said, "Surely Ravan would have been attracted to you. You're so beautiful. And what sort of a man will take back a woman who has been to someone else's house? So you're free to go. You're free to go and live with whomever you wish to. You can pick Bharat, Lakshman or Shatrughna, or even Sugriv or Vibhishan."
This is there in the Valmiki Ramayana?
Yes, yes.
Damn.
So it means nothing to me. Just like you are shocked to hear that. Sita was also shocked. She said, "I did not come here by choice. Ravan forcibly brought me. What is my fault in all this?" She said, "Yadi te ham navidnyata, hata te nasmi shashvatam." If you still don't understand me, I might as well be dead. She said, "I don't want to live with this baseless controversy about my character." She turned towards Lakshman and said, "Lakshman, light a fire and I will step into it." She also makes this interesting comment. She's quite strong with her words. She tells Ram, "If that's how you felt, you should have told me when Hanuman came to meet me. I would have killed myself then itself. You would have saved yourself the trouble of fighting this war. Why put your life at risk and your friend's life at risk?" Anyway, now she tells Lakshman to light a fire so that she can step into it. Lakshman is livid. He cannot understand why Ram is doing this. He looks at Ram angrily. And then Valmiki says, "Savidnyaya manaschandam Ramasya akara suchitam." Ram indicated to him with a gesture, and Lakshman understood what was in his mind. So Ram had indicated to him, "It's okay. Go ahead. I know what I'm doing. It's all an act. Play along." Lakshman lights the fire. Sita says, "If I am not to be blamed, the fire will protect me," and she steps towards the fire. The crowd roars, the women scream, and then Sita jumps into the fire. And then Valmiki says, the Devas, Gandharvas, Rishis, Indra and Brahma come onto the scene, and Agni brings Sita out of the fire. Now, in the beginning, we had said that this is Itihas, right? That is how it happened. You may be wondering, how do you explain this? That she jumps into the fire and then Agni brings her out. So we should understand that Itihas is Purva Vrittam Kathayuktam. Purva Vrittam, that which has happened in the past, and Kathayuktam, that which is told in story format. So Sita stepped into the fire and Agni brought her out and then spoke to Ram. We should understand that as the people spoke up, as Sita was about to step into the fire. And what did the people say? They said, Sita has done nothing wrong. She did not come here by choice. And Agni tells Ram, never again say such things to her. Ram says, I knew Sita very well. I know her. It is not possible for me to leave her. Na vihatum maya shakya. I simply cannot leave her. We are inseparable like the sun is inseparable from the sun's rays. The two are always together. Ram did not have any question for Sita. And now, all of that falls into place. Why did he asked that she should take a bath and put on her jewelry. It was all an act for this, that Ram did not have any question for Sita, but he knew that people would. They would question and doubt her. And he wanted them to see her as the queen. And so she had to come dressed as a queen. And therefore they had to stand there, and he said those provoking words, those hurtful words, so that they spoke up in response. Valmiki's narration is clear, as opposed to what we normally think. Ram did not ask Sita to step into the fire. Never did he doubt her. Never did he question her. But he knew that people would. And he created a situation where they themselves accepted that Sita had done nothing wrong. You know, it's ironic that we falsely accuse Ram of having a mindset that he was in fact speaking up against. That he knew Sita was not to be blamed, but he knew that people would blame her, doubt her, question the victim.
What's the last of the 24,000 verses? Like, where does it end?
There are 6 books of the Ramayana: Balakand, Ayodhyakand, Aranyakand, Kishkindhakand, Sundarkand, and Yuddhakand. And then there is the Uttar Kand, which is, you can say, the epilogue. Now, there are a lot of questions about whether the Uttar Kand is a part of the original Ramayana that Maharshi Valmiki had written. It is quite inconsistent in many ways, and that is a whole other discussion. But Valmiki also writes at the end of Yuddhakand, which is the second last book, Ramayanam idam kritsnam. This is the entire Ramayana. So you can say that the Ramayana ends with Ram's coronation, and afterwards Maharshi Valmiki says, all was well in the land, and sarvam muditam evasit. Yes.
So this incident about the fire and Sita Ma stepping in is in the Yuddhakand?
Yes. So the Yuddhakand is in Lanka, and there is the incident of the Agnipravesh.
Gotcha.
Afterwards, they come back to Ayodhya and they are coronated.
Okay.
Ram is coronated.
And this story of Love and Kush, the sons of Ram,
Yes.
that's in the Uttarkand?
That is in the Uttarkand.
Okay. Have you read the Uttarkand?
Yes, yes.
Could you briefly take us through the storyline in the Uttarkand?
Yes. So the Uttarkand is after the coronation. So the coronation has happened. And it is interesting that the Uttarkand is in many ways inconsistent with what we have read till that point in time. In fact, at that time in the Uttarkand, it says that Ram then bid farewell to hundreds of kings who had gathered in Ayodhya because Bharat had called them to fight Ravan. Now, that is incorrect, because we know that, in fact, after the war, when Hanuman comes to meet Bharat, that is the first time he has heard what has happened with Ram, Lakshman and Sita. So this narration in the Uttarkand is inconsistent with what we have read so far. And like that, there are many inconsistencies. For example, Ravan is at times shown as a weakling in the Uttarkand. But whatever his drawbacks may be, Ravan was a great warrior in the Valmiki Ramayana till the Yuddhakand. And he would never bend, right? In fact, he said, even towards the end of the war, that even if I'm cut into 2 pieces, I will never bend. That is Ravan's character. But in the Uttarkand, there are fights where he gets captured and then he makes a truce, he asks for his release, or his grandfather came to secure his release, etc. So like that, there are many inconsistencies as soon as the Uttarkand starts.
But what's the storyline?
After the coronation, there were some, once again, this is an inconsistency, that after the coronation, according to the Uttarkand, people were unhappy with Sita being the queen. Whereas in the Yuddhakand, it is not mentioned. The Yuddhakand says that Ram ruled for many years and all was happy, and everyone was happy and all was well in the land. So people were unhappy with Sita being the queen, and because of that, Ram asked her to leave.
Do you think people don't know these details simply because they've not studied Sanskrit yet?
Definitely, that's a part of it, that many of the popular productions are not based on the Valmiki Ramayana. So the Ramayana that they know does not answer these questions.
Do you want to answer the age old question about the Rakshasas and the Vanaras? I've asked this to a lot of guests. No one's given me a solid answer till date. So,
Sure.
after all your study, what do you make of the Rakshasas and the
And the
Vanaras?
Vanaras. Sure. And in fact, see, again, the reference text is the Valmiki Ramayana. That is the Itihas. So, who were the Vanaras? If that is the question, then let's look at what Maharshi Valmiki has told us about this. Well, where's the question? Vanar means bandar, monkey. And Valmiki has also used the words Hari, Kapi, Lavangamaha, Shakha Mrugaha, all of which means monkey. Also, there are so many stories about the Vanara's tail. Right? However, Valmiki's words will make it clear, and I'll give you many references. Tell me how deep you want to go. But there is no doubt that the Vanaras were humans, that they were not a different race, and they had the same cultural and intellectual roots as the people of the cities. So the first question, whether they were humans or not, and their tale, right? The first time the Vanaras come onto the scene is when Ram and Lakshman are looking for Sita. They come south near Hampi, Rishyamukh mountain. Sugriv and Hanuman are standing on the mountain and they see these two coming, and Sugriv is suspicious because they are dressed as ascetics, but they're carrying bows and arrows, so they are armed. And he says, this is suspicious. He tells Hanuman to go and talk to them. And interestingly, he says, Prakrite naiva gatva, go in your natural form. And then, Kapirupam parityajya, bhikshurupam tato bheje. Hanuman gave up his monkey attire and went dressed as an ascetic. Okay? So first clue, that their natural form is not the monkey form. Prakrite naiva gatva, kapirupam parityajya, it's something that he could take off. Another clue, you would have heard the story of Ravan setting fire, asking his people to set fire to Hanuman's tail. In that incident, Ravan says, Kapinang kilalangulam ishtam bhavati bhushanam. This tail that the Vanaras have is very dear to them. It's their ornament, abhushan. Kapinang kilalangulam ishtam bhavati bhushanam. It's an ornament, obviously something that they put on. There are other references also where the Vanaras take off and put on their attire. For example, when Hanuman comes to meet Bharat, right at the end, he comes to Ayodhya, he takes off the monkey attire. And before the war, Ram gives a clear instruction to all the Vanaras, do not take off your monkey attire because we should know who's on which side. This is going to be a terrible war, a man-to-man combat. And so in order to know, we should know who is on which side. Don't take off your attire. So as far as the tail goes, it's an ornament. It's something that they put on. Now let's look further, the words that Valmiki has used for the Vanaras. Apart from what I said earlier, Vanar, Kapi, Hari, Plavangamaha, Shakhamurgaha. By the way, all of these words are actually adjectives. So when we say that they are used to denote monkeys, the word Vanar actually means Vanamrati iti Vanaraha. Those who draw sustenance from the Vana are called Vanar. Plavangamaha, which is used for monkeys, means those who jump. So if they are humans who also draw sustenance from the forest, humans who are also adept at jumping and leaping, you can use the same words for them. Also, Valmiki has also used the words Jana, Nari, Stri and Purush to denote the Vanaras. Kishkinda, their capital city, is called Hrishta Pushta Jana Kirna, full of happy and healthy people, Jana. He has also called them Vanavasinaha, Vanaukasaha, Kananaukasaha, which means forest-dwelling people. So these were humans, no doubt, but they put on a dress. Like even today, some forest dwellers would put on feathers or horns. That was their attire that they could take out.
So effectively, when we are visualizing Hanumanji, actually, it was a sage who would put on the gear which made him look sort of like a monkey, an
Yes.
ape. But he was probably a sage.
He was Sarva Shastra Visharadaha. He knew all the Shastras. He was an expert in the Shastras and the Vedas. And this also points to, descriptions like this also point to the fact that they were not culturally different. See, sometimes we believe that forest dwelling communities are different from the city dwelling people. But here, Valmiki gives two references. One, some of the Vanaras were born to rishis. Okay? Just like, say, Ravan. Ravan was also born to a rishi. People of Ayodhya were also born to rishis. And some of the Vanaras were also born to rishis. He has given specific examples also. That there was this Vanar called Archishman. He was born to a rishi called Marichi, etc. So they were not a different race. He has also said at times that Rikshishu cha tatha jatah Vanaraha. Some of the Vanaras were born to Riksha, which is bears. Now, if you say that Vanar actually means monkeys, this phrase would mean that monkeys were born to bears. But that's absurd, obviously. What Valmiki is saying as people who dressed like bears gave birth to people who dressed like Vanars.
Apes.
Vanars, you can say monkeys, right? They put on a tail, perhaps even a face mask, in order to look like a Vanar. But it was a dress that they could take off. And their practices were also very similar. For example, when Vali was killed, his last rites, the Antim Sanskar, was strikingly similar to how it was done for Dashrath, including Jalanjali. When Sugriv was coronated, Valmiki says that all the vidhis were done as per the procedures set down by the Maharshis in the Shastras. So they dressed differently, but they were really not that different.
And geographically speaking, they were from Karnataka.
No, Karnataka too. See, once again, Valmiki has clearly said they were found in the mountains and forests throughout the land, all the way to the Himalayas and the Western Ghats.
Okay.
So they were forest-dwelling people. In fact, when the war happened and Sugriv gave a call for all the Vanaras to come together, there are descriptions of how contingents from the Himalayas, from the west, east, everywhere, they came together.
So this is all tribal folk from the subcontinent.
All forest dwellers.
What's the difference?
Well, let's just use the words that Valmiki has used, because if you say tribal, different connotations to that.
Okay. If you dial the clock...
For example, one point I would like to make is, sometimes we try to fit, Vanaras into modern templates. So we say forest dwellers, all right, then perhaps backward, or you may think that, they are different from the city dwellers. The Vanaras were a very interesting bunch. They did not practice agriculture because they ate fruits and roots, the produce of the forest. By the way, they did not hunt as well. The Vanaras did not hunt, but there were other forest dwelling communities which did hunt.
Vegetarian forest dwellers.
Yes. Again, if you try to fit them in today's templates, that is surprising. Also, sometimes you think that because they are forest dwellers and they don't practice agriculture, they would not have any villages or cities. Well, of course, they didn't have villages because there was no need. They didn't practice agriculture. But they had a fantastic capital city called Kishkinda. It was a Mahapuri, a great city.
Okay. Pretty satisfied with this answer, actually. It's one of the most accurate answers to this question, which I've been asking for the last 5 years, honestly.
Well, I would only say, just like this, all the answers are there in plain sight in the Valmiki Ramayana.
Okay. Let's move on to the Rakshasas.
Okay.
Everyone's favorite topic. Is there an occult element attached here according to you?
The first Rakshas that we come across in the story is Trataka or Tadaka, right? Right in the beginning, when Ram and Lakshman go to protect Vishwamitra's yagya, at that time we come across the Rakshasi Trataka. So this incident itself shatters many stereotypes about the Rakshasas. One, she was 2 days walking distance away from Ayodhya. The incident where it happened, Ram and Lakshman had walked for 2 days and then they met this Rakshasi. So they were not necessarily people of South India or Sri Lanka. She was not born a Rakshasi. She became a Rakshasi, Trataka. She was actually born in a very good family, and over time she became full of Rakshasness, Rakshasatvam. So she became a Rakshasi. Many times we think that they were a completely different society, that they were the other. But there are many instances where Valmiki shows that they had the same intellectual and cultural roots again as the people of the other cities. For example, in Lanka, Hanuman heard people reciting the Vedas. He saw the swastik symbol. He saw an image of Lakshmi. And by the way, he also says that the Rakshasas of Lanka, some of them were, many times we draw them as hideous looking. But Valmiki says that some of them were Virupan, hideous looking, but also Surupan, very good looking. They came in all shapes and sizes. So Valmiki's words shatter many of the stereotypes about the Rakshasas. Now, did they have some special powers? Your question about the occult. By that you mean, I suppose, special powers, right? Indrajit is said to have had the ability to become invisible. He also had some very powerful astras and shastras. The Rakshasas are sometimes also confused with what we call asura, right? We use the words interchangeably. But actually, the fight between the Devas and the Asuras refers to a time much before the Ramayana. And the Rakshasas trace their lineage to the Devas, not the Asuras. But they had similar characteristics. So sometimes the words are used interchangeably, but they are actually different.
Okay. What is the origin story of Ravan within the Valmiki Ramayana?
He was the son of a rishi, but his mother was a Rakshasi, and he became a Rakshas himself.
Okay. What other gems of Ravan have you unearthed from your studies?
Ravan could have been a great king. In fact, when Hanuman first saw him, he was brought in shackles and he looked up at Ravan, and his thought was he could have been such a great king. But it's interesting how in the story, the first time Ravan comes onto the scene, it tells us a lot about his character and why he had taken the turn for the worse. So in Panchavati, Ravan's brother Khar had attacked Ram, and Ram had killed the entire Rakshas force at Janasthan, including Khar. And one of the soldiers, Akampan, ran back to Lanka and told Ravan that their forces at Janasthan have been decimated, right?
This is after the abduction of Sita Ma.
That is before. This is before. So, and Ravan says, "Who has done this? And I will go and kill him right now." And Akampan says, "He's too powerful. You cannot fight him head on. But there is a way. He has a wife. She's very beautiful. And if you abduct her, that will break him. That will weaken him." And that is why Ravan decides to abduct Sita. At that time, he has not even heard about Shurpanakha, by the way. He has only heard from Akampan that his forces in Janasthan have been routed. Shurpanakha comes onto the scene later on.
But why were the forces sent in the first place?
Right. So in Panchavati, Shurpanakha had come to the hermitage where Ram, Lakshman and Sita were staying. She was attracted to Ram. She proposed to him. He declined. She proposed to Lakshman. He declined too. And then she thought that this was all because of Sita, that because Sita was there, Ram was not accepting her. So she attacked Sita. And in that skirmish, Lakshman came to the rescue and Shurpanakha was injured. She went back and told her brother Khar that this had happened. Khar attacked Ram and got killed.
Or again, the more overarching topic is about Rakshasas in general. Do you think that there's an occult element involved? Like, why are the Rakshasas described as a more powerful army than the Vanar Sena, for example?
Well, the Rakshasas had access to astras and shastras, just, advanced weapon systems, just like the people of Ayodhya or other Janpads. The Vanaras did not have any advanced war equipment. They fought with their bare hands, nails, their hands, rocks, tree trunks, whatever they could find.
Okay.
So that was the difference between the two armies. One was very well equipped with all sorts of, bows and arrows, clubs, spears, astras, shastras, everything.
Okay. Would you like to draw out a picture of the actual war? If we hypothetically take a time machine and go back to around 15,000 BC when that war was happening, what did it look like? How many people were participating? What is the visual of the war field? Why do Ravan's sons have those kind of powers in the first place? What is actually trying to be said from a human history perspective?
So the Uttar Kand, the final war between the Vanar Sena and Sri Ram and Lakshman against the Rakshasas. This war was very different from, let's say, what we may know of in the Mahabharata. In this war, there were no rules. So it was fought day and night, whatever it takes. The Vanaras surrounded the city, encircled the city on all sides, filled up the moat. There was a protective moat around the city and charged. And they charged with rocks, tree trunks, whatever they could find to break down the doors and attack. The Rakshasas came out of the city to protect it. And it was soon a man-to-man combat. So there are descriptions of a Vanar sitting on top of a Rakshas, and these are detailed descriptions, sitting on top of Vanar, grabbing his head, twisting the neck, and yanking it off. There were many, many casualties, by the way, on both sides. Even before the war, Ram had made this observation. He said, for one person's mistake, this is going to be a terrible war. And Valmiki describes, dead bodies and blood, that because of the fighting, the dust had been kicked up, right? And you could hardly see. And after a while, the dust settled down because of all the blood. And what emerged was a picture of limbs and dead bodies and so on. There were millions upon millions of Vanaras, according to the description. Now, there could be some exaggeration in this, but it was a very intense war without a stop, practically. Of course, when both sides were, tired or to regroup, they would go back a little bit and attack again.
Which side was bigger?
In terms of the numbers, both sides were had huge numbers at hand. The Rakshasas were better equipped because they had all the arms which the Vanaras didn't have.
How does the war pan out?
Ravan suffers one loss after another amongst his top generals. Of course, there are times when the Vanaras also have a setback, like the time when Indrajit's arrows injure many of them. And of course, there is the famous episode of Ram and Lakshman lying injured because of Indrajit's arrows. So there is one interesting point where on the first day of war, Indrajit injures Ram and Lakshman, and he thinks that he has won the war, that they are dead. And he goes back and tells Ravan that they are dead. And he embraces him, thinking that the war is over on the first day itself. But overall, Ravan continues to lose one general after another. Finally, he calls on Kumbhakarna, his brother. Indrajit, his son, and in the end, he goes himself as well.
What is said about him as a warrior?
He was a great warrior, no doubt. So was Indrajit, by the way, who had won over Indra. That is why the name Indrajit. Ram and Ravan's battle is also described in detail. And in the end, the arrow that takes down Ravan finally is described as, you would almost think of it as a modern day missile, because the description is given that it had a hollow center. There was a fire burning through that hollow center, and it could blast through man, beast, or doors. And that is the one that hit Ravan, and it went right through him. And as his bow slipped, Valmiki says, even before he hit the ground, his life breath had also slipped out of him. It was so powerful.
What do you make of the weaponry after your studies?
Clearly, there is some technology, war technology, that has been lost over time. So we don't understand it. Some of it is possible to understand. For example, the description of the missile that I gave. Yes, you would say some sort of a chemical reaction which generates fire, and therefore the arrow zips forward and strikes. But there is also the war technology related to mantras, which we don't understand now. We can't recreate that.
That's clearly written in the Valmiki Ramayana,
Yes.
that there was some element of...
Well, there are descriptions of them, using mantras to fire up weapons. So Vishwamitra taught Ram and Lakshman about a lot of weapon systems. And how they exactly work, we don't know.
But then what's written in the Valmiki Ramayana?
For example, there is a list of weapons, right? There's a long list. And I suppose that was clear for someone at that time what it meant. In fact, some of these weapons were also told that, all right, for that astra, there are two variants, the dry and the wet type. Okay. So it's a listing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just limited to the Vimanas, because that's what's made it to the West. The West knows about knowledge about the Vimanas.
Yeah.
But there's also chemical weapons, missiles.
Other technology which could have been lost over time.
Okay. What fascinated you?
And by the way, the Vimanas, you would have heard of the Pushpak Viman, but there was not only one Viman in Ravan's Lanka. Actually, there were multiple Vimans parked like a parking lot outside his palace. That's how it's described.
Okay. Yeah. What fascinated you the most amongst all this weaponry talk?
What fascinated me was that the Vanaras had nothing in terms of this weaponry. But what they did have was strength and courage. And they quickly overcame, from a war point of view, the Rakshasas had a strategic advantage that they were powerful from a distance, right? They had weapon systems. And all the Vanaras could do was throw things. They had to be close enough to do that. And the Rakshasas gave up this critical strategic advantage by not acting soon enough, allowing the Vanaras to come close.
Mike Tyson. You go in and destroy. Okay. Is there any other part of the Valmiki Ramayana you wish to cover in this episode?
So Dashrath was the king of Ayodhya, and he was getting old, and he thought that the time had come to hand over the empire. A parishad was called, and Dashrath proposed Ram's name, his eldest son, and the parishad accepted the proposal, and Ram was chosen to be the successor. He would be crowned as the Yuvraj. But then something happened because of which Ram was not crowned the Yuvraj, right? Usually it is understood that Dashrath asked him to leave. Like I said right in the beginning, the summary, somebody may say Dashrath asked Ram to leave. But in the Valmiki Ramayana, that did not happen. The night before the coronation, Dashrath had 3 wives, and Kaikeyi, one of them, reminded Dashrath that he had made two promises to her, given her two boons earlier, because of uh, she had helped him in an earlier battle, because of which he had given her two boons. And now she said, I want to ask for those boons. It's as if, in contemporary terms, Dashrath had given her two signed checks, blank checks, and now she had filled them up and with the amounts and brought them back. So her two asks were that her son, Bharat, should be made Yuvraj, not Ram, and Ram should be sent off into exile. Dashrath pleaded with her to change her mind, but she did not budge. The next morning, the day Ram was supposed to be coronated, he came to see her, touched their feet. And all Dashrath could say was, Ram! And then he choked and he could not say anything. Ram was shocked. He looked to Kaikeyi and said, what has happened? And Kaikeyi told him about the two boons and her asks. Ram's immediate reaction was, Evamastu, so be it. Gamishyami vanam, I will go into the forest. And then, very important, Radnyah pratidnyam anupalayan, in order to uphold the king's promise. So Ram gave this reason that he was going into the forest because he had to honor the promise that the king had made. Ram's argument was this. Ram was always, the primary driver for him was welfare of the people, the well-being of all, Prajapalana. And he knew for that, dharma, that is the righteous way of living, and satya are crucial. If the king's word is not held true, then whose word is held true? Where is dharma? And so he could not do anything that would break the king's promise. And he decided to go into the forest. Without any anger, without any irritation. His life had just turned upside down. Think about it. Many times, we face a shock. It could be losing a job, not getting into the college that we had wanted. Life takes a turn that we did not expect. And what can be the most extreme of this? From having the lordship of the whole world to having nothing at all. That's the turn that Ram's life took. And he accepted it without any anger. He touched Ram and Kaikeyi's feet. And at that time, all Dashrath could say was, Dhik kashtam, oh, what terrible torture. He did not want Ram to leave, but he was trapped. And then Ram went and told what had happened to his brother Lakshman, mother Kausalya, and wife Sita. Their reactions are very interesting. So Lakshman is also, a prince. And he does not agree with what Ram is doing. He says, it is your dharma. The right thing to do is for you to stay here and take care of the empire. You should not leave. In fact, he says, Atmastham Kurushasanam, take control of the empire. The full shlok is, Yavadeva najanati, Kaschidartham iman narah, Tavadeva maya sardham, Atmastham Kurushasanam. Before the word gets out, take control of the empire, and I will help you. Lakshman knows that there may be resistance, and there may be a civil war. And if it comes to that, he says, I will kill anybody who stands up against you. I will kill everyone, in fact, even if it means not a single person is left alive in Ayodhya. Ram's mother, Kausalya, also tells him not to leave. She tells him, you're leaving because of something that your father said. Well, I'm your mother. I'm telling you, don't go. Afterwards, Ram's guru also tells him, I am your guru. I'm your father's guru too. And I'm telling you, do not go. Right? So there are many very people close to Ram who are advising not to go. But he continues to say that I cannot do anything which will break the king's promise. And therefore, even if it means, see, Ram had done nothing wrong in this, right? He was the rightful successor. Still, he continued to hold that he had to go. Now, the only person who did not make an argument that Ram should not go was Sita, his wife. And Sita also knew, Valmiki says that she knew the right thing to do. She always followed it. Dharmajna, Dharmacharini. Her only argument was that if the demand, whatever was demanded of Ram, automatically applied to her because they were married. And so she had to go as well into the forest. That was her ask. A lot of interesting, learnings or takeaways for even our times. I spoke about if life takes a difficult turn, how are you able to face it? Sometimes we are let down by people close to us. Could be a colleague, friend, family. Here Ram was let down by his stepmother. And by the way, he just called her mother. So imagine being let down by someone you call mother. Even then, how do you react to the situation? Lakshman advised Ram, do not go. But when Ram said, I have to go, Lakshman said, I will come with you. Again, this is something, incredible support. Lakshman's argument was this: when you were chosen as the Yuvraj, as the crown prince, you had said, we have to do this together. Now you're being sent into exile, we have to do that together as well. So his argument was empire or exile. We have to do it together. And finally, the most important learning, there are times when there is the right path, which is the difficult one, and then an easy path. Which one do we pick? Many times it's not clear which is the right path. Here, Ram chose the most difficult path where he lost everything in spite of so many arguments by others that he could have accepted and said, all right, I will stay. But will we choose the right path when we are faced with a choice like this?
Okay. Can we go back to the geographical map of India?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, I think when most people think of both the Ramayana and Mahabharata, they try visually placing stories and events within the geographical map of India.
Right.
Once you studied the actual Ramayana, did something change in your viewpoint? For example, the whole Lanka thing we discussed.
Right.
Or there is a perception that Karnataka was the home to the Vanaras originally, and Hanumanji was born near Hampi. Therefore, is he a Kannadiga?
Well, so that part is true, that their center was near Hampi, but they were there in the forests and mountains throughout the land.
Okay.
And as to your question about the geographical layout, Valmiki's descriptions are striking. You can almost, even today, go and read about the descriptions and see that, yes, this is the place that he's talking about. Whether it is Ayodhya, the main places of the Ramayana, Ayodhya, then Chitrakoot, then Panchavati, Kishkinda, and finally Lanka. So even in Kishkinda, there is the description of the first time the rain arrives and how the colors of the rocks change. If you've been near Hampi, you would know that it's a landscape full of boulders, red, grayish boulders, and the description exactly matches what we see even today.
What has fascinated me about this whole conversation is that you have only uncovered all these nuggets because you've actually figured Sanskrit first. Am I right? Like, that's the only way to actually dive deep into the Valmiki Ramayana.
Well, that's the best way. So, you would refer a book to your friend if you like it, right? Or you would refer a movie. I would like you to read the Valmiki Ramayana yourself.
Which one?
Pick up the Gita Press Gorakhpur or the online versions. But if you don't have time, to learn Sanskrit and read the original, then you can watch the video series.
That you've made based
Yes,
on...
the 21 Notes Valmiki Ramayana video series.
What's your intention behind making that?
My intention is to connect today's people with Valmiki's original words.
Okay. Do you keep going deeper into it every time you study it more?
Definitely. And that happens to all of us. In fact, that is why the Ramayana is meant to be read again and again. You do a Parayan. In the beginning, we had spoken about the relevance of the Ramayana. And, whether you read a book about fitness or you read someone's podcast about fitness and you get inspired and you do it again and again. The Ramayana is also meant to be read again and again. And of course, you go deeper every time.
But why?
If you're playing tennis or table tennis or cricket, you practice the same shot again and again, right? Till that shot becomes your muscle memory. Next time you play it automatically. The Ramayana, Maharshi Valmiki wrote that because he wanted to set the highest example of good behavior. So if you read it again and again, the right actions become your default actions. And that is how it builds character.
Okay. So you're saying that when you keep downloading the story, the emotions also get downloaded eventually and probably turn into some kind of character traits in yourself.
Yes. The Valmiki Ramayana does not give do's and don'ts. That you should practice this or not practice this. Everything is by example. So when you read it again and again, you get inspired and you do the right thing based on the examples that you've read.
Gotcha. Okay. Yashodeep sir, that was the episode for today and your debut on TRS. Thank you. So
Thank you very much.
Enlightening. I love doing these conversations because when I meet people like yourself who've dedicated their entire life to our history, I always learn more. And that's the case with the viewers as well. So appreciate your time, and looking forward to meeting you again and seeing what else you have uncovered through the process of learning Sanskrit and the process of deep diving into Valmiki's Ramayana. Thank you. Sir. Thank you, sir. I hope you had fun.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, sir. That was the episode for today, ladies and gentlemen. I will direct you to Yashodeep sir's channel. Trust me, I've been exploring it for the past few weeks. That's how we decided on this particular guest in this particular podcast. Please go and check it out. In an age where we're served an excess of information and we're served information that may not even be historically accurate, I think if you're looking at the Ramayana from a historical perspective, you should reference the work of people like Yashodeep. So definitely go and check out his channel. He'll be back on the podcast very soon. Please let me know what you thought of today's episode, and please let me know what you'd like to see in the future when we're making more episodes like this on TRS.